Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good morning, everybody. I think we're just about right on time, and I can see quite a number of people have joined this session. So let me welcome you to this application delivery special interest group. And before diving into introductions, I wanted to give you a little context of what we're actually going to be talking about today. So we've always used our own tools to deliver our own tools, and if you go back into time till 2011, we released what we referred to at the time as version 11 of our application portfolio, and this was it. It was 2 lifecycle tools, 2 performance, and 4 functional tools. Now, we've been on an agile journey for a couple of years or so before this, very agile methods of working, but nonetheless, we were still 18-month or so waterfall type releases. Now, if you jump forward 7 years from here to the same period, 2017-18, and this is what we did. Many of these represent monthly product releases, but even the slower ones here, they were still quarterly. And then if you move forward to what we did last year, well over 100 different releases. Now, I should say this is just our application delivery tool sets, which consists of around 20 or so different products. Micro Focus itself is way over 300 or so. So you can imagine the scale across the whole company. Now, these releases are obviously just the headline figure. To get there, that represents 100,000 or so different builds, 10 million tests, et cetera, et cetera. And it always stuck in my mind that our own R&D QA folk used to say that they would get a new build every 2 to 4 weeks, and now they get it hourly. So that's a huge amount of change that's been going on. So with this, lots of change, lots of new things. Perhaps some of these things got missed in the crowd of other things, and also within it all, there's been a huge amount of innovation that we've done. So we wanted to share just 20 of these things. I should say the order we're going to do this in is just one that makes logical sense in terms of progression. Any importance attached to it is obviously going to be determined by individual customers, and the challenges that they're wanting to solve. So as I say, there's lots of new things here, but many are also developed to solve our DevOps challenges, how we move from the initial working with very waterfall releases to where we are now with lots of monthly releases, builds to QA teams every hour. How do you manage those types of things? So a lot of the features within the tool sets were developed there for our sake, for our customer sakes, to help us all on this particular journey. Now, to help me tell this story, I'm going to be joined by my colleagues, Ahmed, John, Ray, Sean, Davey, and myself. And collectively, we make up the application delivery management ADM pre-sales team in the UK and Ireland. So rather than getting them to introduce themselves now, I'm going to get them to say something as and when they come in to do their particular portions of this. So with that, let's kick off. So the first thing, if you think about those changes that we made from one thing to another, is, DevOps is lots of little things put together to make that one bigger thing. But if you talk to the people that were in charge of that transition, at the top of our particular part of the company, of all those little things, the biggest of the lot was ownership, that they said, and getting people to take ownership of things was, looking back, was a huge thing. So, whatever it may well be, whether it's test automation, broken builds, broken tests, etc. I mean, we do the World Quality Report, as I'm sure a lot of you know, every year with a number of partners, and test automation, as it says there, is it hasn't really delivered, and the reason it hasn't really delivered over time is because people want to do things a lot quicker, and test automation is is an effort, so it's a lot easier really to not do test automation. So what we wanted to do is, as we were going through, is to reflect that within our tool. So here's ALM Octane. So, within the pipelines module of ALM Octane, I can dive into it and I can link into all those other tool sets around that we've got with DevOps. So, build servers, code management systems, etc., to start to understand what's going on with them. So we've got different builds, the different state of builds that we've got. I can then dive down into see the different builds, but also the tests that are executed as part of those builds. Now, when these start to go wrong, how do we start to manage it? You can see here, this is actually a reflection of our own R&D solution to build Octane. So we've got 7,000 different tests there. I can then narrow them down to say, well, I'm only interested in the ones that have failed within this particular area and this particular build. We've got 191 different failures, but I can cluster them. So the clustering then says that, if I can fix one of these, then I can fix them all. So the largest cluster we've got there is 39 different items. And I can go and start to look at what's affecting that. And one thing I can do then is take ownership of it. Originally, we had a button there which said nothing to do with me, kind of getting rid of any ownership, and changing that around, that philosophy around, has been a huge thing. I can then come into also Octane will then look at information from the build servers, code tools, etc., to make an assessment of who it should automatically give that ownership to, and that's been a massive thing that we've done across trying to make sense of all that information that you get from DevOps around the whole portfolio of tools. So the next thing that we've done is pragmatic view of tooling. Obviously, as I say, we use our own tools to develop our own tools, but we also use a fair amount of open source. And to talk about that, I'm going to get my colleague Ray, first of all, say a few words about himself, but also talk about how we're using that.
Thanks, Rob. So Ray Tomini, I'm pre-sales based in Ireland, and this little slot is around what we're doing with Selenium in particular. So if we move on to the next slide there. Since Selenium was introduced in 2004, and a little bit of trivia is the name Selenium was chosen as it was an antidote to mercury poisoning. Mercury being the big vendor of the time in commercial test automation tools, and also, as it happens, the company I worked for back in 2004. A lot has changed since then, and Mercury, for one, is now in the bloodline of Micro Focus, and we have embraced Selenium as a tool that is very, very useful for developers to make use of, and bearing in mind that most of the automation in testing is done by developers early on in the life cycle. So in this section, we're going to look at shifting the functional automation effort left, how we complement Selenium these days. And since 2016, in fact, we've been a sponsor of Selenium. So if I switch into my demo here, what I'm going to show is from my MacBook, I've got here a standard Selenium project test, and you can see the XPath locators here. And those of you who are familiar with WebDriver, using XPath complex locators to find things. We have built an object identification center for Selenium, a spy for Selenium that lets us recognize objects there in the Selenium, in the browser, in the automation test. And if I just click on that there, in the clip, the Object Identification Center, we launch the browser, and we can then spy on what the browser is rendering. So what we're doing here is extending the Selenium WebDriver, and we're going to go to eBay or Amazon.com here, and let's just get that done. Go into Amazon.com. I'm going to search here for UFT software. And what we'll do then is we have a set of results, very dynamic results. We want to spy on these objects and recognize them, generate the code to automate them. So if I click on one here, you'll see the spy picking up all the properties of this object, including on the left side there, the full domain hierarchy of where that object is in the page. And I can use any combination of locators, including these ones at the top here, the standard Selenium ones, but also including extra ones that we've added, like visual or visible text. So I can see all of the text associated with that. I can begin to, instead of picking everything in that text, I can wildcard it, so making it more robust, making it easier to recognize just a pattern of text rather than maybe text that includes a specific price that might change and therefore cause the test to fail later on. I can validate it there and then rather than replaying it through Selenium. And I can generate the code for automation in Java or JavaScript. So having generated that, paste it back in here into my test, and I have a very simple piece of automation there. And in IntelliSense, I can click that object and then replay it from here. So I've very quickly built up my my automation test. So when it comes to replaying this, if I just close off the browser here, I can replay and it will find that object. The point of all of this is not that it's just, you know, cool and easier than using the inspector and Selenium. It means that your tests are more robust and more likely to work across platform as well and across different versions of the browser, as XPaths and things like that will vary. The chances of maybe a pattern of text being the same in different browsers is much higher. So there you can see it's clicking into that object, and we have now completed that test. So that's the Object Identification Center, the UFT for Selenium, one aspect of how we can begin to shift functional testing left. Back to you again, Rob.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much, Ray. So yeah, with that, I should have said beforehand that if you've got any questions as we go along, then there's a question box within this GoToWebinar. So just fill them out there. If they're relevant, we can pick them up as we go along, or we'll obviously take them at the end. Now, the next thing, you know, which is we've kind of moved on to do is, you know, in the past, it's probably fair to say we had a convoluted system of support enhancements for people, you know, recommending new features. As I say, you know, a lot of these things, you know, come from us, but they also come from our customers. I mean, you take a product like Octane, I think something like 80-something% or 85% of things in the backlog come directly from customers that they want to have, and you know, that's kind of replicated across the whole product group. So just really wanted to draw your attention. If you go to the Micro Focus community, you can bring up the different product areas that we've got there. So I've obviously highlighted the application delivery management. Once you click on that, then you'll be taken to a whole list of different products within it. You select your particular product. In this case, I've selected Octane as we're talking about it, and you can see there the different things that people have added. So you know, some of the hot ideas, which some of the new things which people have asked, but you can also order them in terms of top ideas, and you can see if I zoom in on this particular piece, you can see, you know, the status of some of those that have been accepted into the backlog. So things like integrating Octane with Teams, or being able to copy workspaces, which is seems a very good thing to be able to do. So yeah, so it's a great thing. If you've got any ideas about anything that you want to do, add them in there. You can vote on other people's things, but it's a great way to contribute to our delivery portfolio. So we've been talking about Octane. You know, let's carry on. One of the things that we wanted to do with Octane and across the board is to try and make sense of the data that you get. So I know, Sean, you've been looking at some of the new analysis modules within Octane.
Yes, thanks, Rob. So just to quickly introduce myself, it's Sean Bosclover. So I come from an Agile background, so Octane feels very comfortable for me to be able to dive in and look at that. So if I bring up Octane and take a look, then that first screen that I have is that dashboard view. At the moment, I've got the hat on of somebody who's part of a Scrum team. So as Rob was saying, we want to take a look a little bit at the analytics. So I'll change my dashboard view to give me that analytics view. And so I can now start to see the data related to analytics that are going on. So I can look at my features and just start to understand what has happened over time. So asking questions like, am I getting better over time? So the cycle time for those features. So across the bottom, we see the different features that are going out the door. And are we getting faster? So it's a question of, are we getting faster, but is quality maintaining? So it's being able to drill down into that data, and on the right-hand side, we're able to see and compare that speed versus quality then. Looking across that cycle time still across those features, we can see in which particular phases are we running into problems? Are we having any problems with our delays in particular areas? So if we start to look at our wait states, we can look at those individual phases and start to then think about, if we start to eliminate those wait states, looking at that Liverpool release, we've got 15 days where that feature is sitting and waiting for somebody to pick it up and do something else. If I was able to take that 15 days, effectively probably a sprint, what would happen if I was able to get that to customers that much sooner? So it's being able to get and understand the analytics behind the scenes. So are we investing in automation? So we're looking at that level of automation that we're providing across those different releases. So being able to see that, is our investment going up? Is it having an impact into our development cycle time? Is it actually reducing our costs? So it might be able to answer questions around that investment that we're doing with automation. And then being able to look at the impact of those changes across those different application modules. So our particular backlog module, how much testing are we doing there? How much risk is there related to that? So it's being able to compare the amount of manual tests, automation testing, and that level of risky changes. So we've got a fairly high level of risk for the backlog. We might want to increase our level of automation and drive there. I do love a good cumulative flow chart. So in the bottom left here, we're going to look at that cumulative flow. We start to see that that purple area, the testing blue area is starting to increase across our cumulative flow. So that might be a conversation I want to have with our testing team to understand, why has that gap started to widen, and then I can drive forward and get better results from there. So speaking of testing, it's an important thing to keep in mind. So we're going to have Ahmed talk about our ALM solution and be able to drive forward some new innovations that we've done there. Ahmed?
Thank you, Sean. My name is Ahmed Singer. I'm Solution Architect in the ADM team in the UK. And as Sean said, we're going to talk about usability and making life easy for all our ALM customers. We've released a new ALM client that is lightweight, portable, and no longer dependent on Internet Explorer, and also no longer dependent on adding permissions, which many of you now will be happy to hear. This gives you better usability and access to your ALM instance. So let's take a quick preview of the ALM client launcher. You can see here, obviously, we're accessing it from the desktop. Again, you obviously fill in your details, your username and password, select obviously the project that you want to work with. And again, you can see the client launcher launching. We can navigate to the nodes on the left. We can expand the various tree nodes. And again, we can obviously then click on the view on my homepage dashboard and view some of the daily reports. So again, you have the same functionality of accessing the ALM client as you did before in the browsers. So making it life a lot easier for you to access the environments. It's a short preview, but I'm now going to hand over to Jonathan, who will now show you how we measure performance with Load Runner Cloud Analytics.
Thanks, Ahmed. So my name's Jonathan Sprake. I'm a technical consultant in the UK pre-sales team, and my background's in performance engineering, so I'm going to be covering some of the aspects of performance testing with the Load Runner family in today's session. So first, we're going to look at Load Runner Cloud, which is our newest platform, and some of the analytics. So here's the Load Runner Cloud dashboard, and you can see we've got a number of transactions here. We're looking at the running users along the top. And then actually it's one transaction, but from 4 different aspects. So we've got 2 locations, and we've got no emulation and mobile typical network conditions. So the 2 transactions at the bottom here are no emulation, and the two at the top are the ones with network conditions, mobile conditions. So we can see from North Virginia, AWS, our homepage transaction takes around a second, and that's the 95th percentile value. But you can see the transactions at the top here, the same transaction with mobile conditions, and that's latency, packet loss, and bandwidth simulation. It now takes 3.4 seconds. So if we only tested with available bandwidth, we might not uncover performance problems that those network conditions introduce. So also on this graph, you can see we have an anomaly, and this is a transaction that's highlighted. You can see some shading around the line here, and that's telling us that this transaction is outside of the expected range. And you can see there's another one there on one of the mobile transactions. We get warnings for anomalies and SLAs during a test, so as well as seeing them on the graphs, if you happen to be viewing a particular transaction that has an anomaly, we can also add them from the warnings section. So here we can see a number of events. We have a start time and a duration for each event, and a number of occurrences or transactions that fall within the anomaly. So let's have a look at this largest group, and we can see they're ranked by the number of occurrences, and we have different metrics, transaction response times, the 95th percentile, and some averages, and some other past transaction metrics. And we can very easily add these to the chart to see what's happening. So this is the home page we just looked at. So let's add running users, and this is how you would drill down on an anomaly. So we can see that when we ramped up the number of users, the site became unstable. And if we actually click on the transaction, it gives us a bit more detail. So the gray shaded area is the expected region, and the transaction has fallen within that expected region. And the lighter color shows us when the transaction has fallen outside of that expected region. So LoadRunner Cloud is using some machine learning analytics in the background to monitor the traffic, the load, and the transactions to create this anomaly detection. So that's how we can view anomalies. We can view SLAs in a similar way. So from the SLA warning panel at the top here, you can see we have SLA warnings for 3 transactions. And again, we can add these to the graph from the pop-up. So here are those 3 transactions, and again you can see when we ramp up the number of users, we get performance problems. So you can see actually the SLA overlaid on the graph for each of these individual transactions. So for this, for the home page, the SLA was 10 seconds, but it took 21 seconds, and you can see we've got the shaded area showing the breach region. And for the other 2 transactions, the SLA was at 3 seconds, and they both took around 21 seconds. But it was only these 3 spikes, so we've got an intermittent problem, but it's not a kind of continual transaction problem. So that's some of the analytics capabilities of LoadRunner Cloud. So we looked at network virtualization and how you can simulate different connectivity types and view the differences between the transaction response times. And we looked at anomaly detection, how you can see that on a graph from the shaded areas, but also how you can add anomalies and SLAs from the warning panels at the top of the screen. So the next session, again, we're going to look at some capabilities in LoadRunner Cloud, and we've just seen how you can drill down on analytics within a single run, but how can we look at the transaction performance across runs? So how can we trend the performance between runs? So for the run we just looked at, or rather the test we just looked at, we have the run history here on the trending page. And you can see in the middle we had a bit of a performance problem there. And the lines we can see on the graph are the minimum, average, and maximum response times across all the transactions in a test. At run 1803, performance seemed to stabilize, a bit of a blip at 1806, and then back to normal. So how can we compare the runs that looked good with this big performance problem in the middle to find out what that problem was? So here we are on the run history page, and from the top 3 regression graph at the top, we can see that the home page was the one that blipped in that run 1806. So that's a good candidate for what might have been the problem in those earlier tests. You can also see one of the runs here, 1803, that first stable run is marked as a benchmark, and we'll see how that's relevant when we drill into the results of the most recent test. So at the top, there's a button called Compare, and you can see at the moment we've got it set to benchmark. So if you press this button, it will just very easily add those transactions from the previous test, or from the benchmark test rather in this case. So we can see run 1803 and run 1809, and the metrics look very similar. Those were both tests that were pretty stable. And there's our transaction that we looked at already with the anomaly. And if you click on it now, you can see both sets of data in the legend at the bottom. So we can see the average is very similar, 213 and 206 milliseconds, but the maximum for that most recent test, the 1809, is a bit higher because of those spikes. But it's not just the benchmark that we can compare with. We can actually compare with any of the previous runs. So let's have a look at 1663, which was in the middle of that dodgy region a few tests back. And immediately we can see why the response times were high in that test, because we've got all these large peaks. And so we can click on the different transaction or the different run in the transaction at the bottom, and it will highlight that for us. And you can see that this was much spikier, much more unstable. The response time when it was stable was actually pretty good, but it was very spiky. So it's very easy to compare transactions with a previous run, and you can do this live during a performance test, or as I'm looking at here, in the results after a run. So that's performance trending with LoadRunner Cloud. And next, I'm going to hand over to Ray, who is going to take us through UFT and mobile testing.
Thanks, John. So yeah, what I'm going to talk about here is how UFT has grown from the range of environments that it supports. I think on this next slide, you can see the history of the environments that we support in UFT. I mentioned, back in the early days of Selenium 2004, the same bloodline is what you're seeing here, and we've continued to extend support for these environments over time. But this also serves as a kind of glimpse into our intentions in the future. We're not just supporting the largest range of environments with UFT in the past, but it also means that we're quick and very quick to introduce support for the newer environments as they become available. Our product range as well, UFT, you see UFT1 mentioned here. We've rebranded the family of the UFT products. So UFT1 is the core product that would have been known as just Quick Test Professional back in the old days. It's now UFT1. So part of that is the support for mobile devices, and what you can do is tether your own local device to UFT1 and drive automation tests against it. Nothing else needed. You don't need mobile lab or anything like that with UFT Mobile. You can just have a developer or a tester connect their local device over USB to the UFT1 PC and begin to automate and test against that. And then when you go to do that, we include a range of emulators. So you take your own local device, you want to replay and test against other types of devices that you will be, or your customers will be using perhaps. So in UFT1, we have the support for different emulators. You can see here a range of them. Now out of the box, there's maybe 15 or 20. Up on GitHub, we publish and update updated lists of these devices. So in this instance that I have here, I've got over 75 different mobile devices that we can emulate when it comes to replaying automated tests, enabling testers and developers to code and test on a wide range of devices just from running UFT with a locally connected mobile device. So that's the mobile testing. We've continued to innovate, and in this area, in mobile in particular, I'm going to look at UFT Mobile. So UFT Mobile is the new name for Mobile Center. It used to be called Mobile Center, and it's really around lab management for our devices. So you'll see UFT Mobile supporting native devices that are connected to it, also devices around the organization, perhaps devices in the cloud, emulators, and being able to access all of that from the range of test tools, our own test tools and open source, so Selenium, Appium, as well as our own tools, UFT1, and the performance tools, the load runner tools that Jonathan has been talking about. So UFT Mobile is really enterprise lab management for your mobile devices. And when it comes to deployment, the architecture of UFT Mobile from the very early days has been to offer a complete flexibility in terms of deployment. So you can have this fully on-premise. A lot of banks, in particular in EMEA, are interested in just having fully on-premise solutions, nothing in the cloud. So you can have UFT Mobile and all of its devices purely on-premise within the firewall, but you can also have the other extreme and anything in between. So you can have UFT Mobile devices in the cloud, UFT Mobile itself as a software as a service that you consume, and you can have a range of cloud devices through the Amazon device farm. So the connectors that you see here in the bottom left here would be individual groups of users around an organization. You can have connector UFT mobile PCs where they can plug in their own devices locally. So you can have testers and developers in Bangalore, in Riga, in Dublin, in London, all within one organization, all sharing each other's devices and test and development assets with UFT mobile. So let's switch into a quick demo of UFT Mobile, what it looks like. I'm going to show here some of the new functionality in the latest release. You'll see here the collection of Android and iOS devices that I have. Again, a mix of locally connected ones or devices in the cloud. All of these, as it happens, are in the cloud, hosted by ourselves. So I'm opening up one of them here, and you can see I'm straight into looking at that device remotely now, and I can begin to do things with it. I can interrogate it and see what apps are installed on it. So these are apps that are hosted by Mobile Center itself that we can deploy down onto the device on demand, as well as apps like Calc and so on that we can run from the device itself. As I tap around here, launching through the demo app, the steps are captured above. So I've got a history of tapping each, the add to cart button here that appears at the top as the exploratory test. So I'm keeping a track of the steps that I took as I navigate through this exploratory test on this individual device. You'll see also that the response is very quick. It's very performant, very quick, easy to use, even though it is, in this case, hosted in the States, this device, and I'm running it from Dublin. So I have my exploratory test there that I can save as a zip and then end the session. And that's the UFT Mobile Enterprise Lab Management for mobile devices in the cloud, on-premise or hybrid. Switching then to GUI-less or API level testing. A lot of people don't associate that with UFT1, that we talk about GUI testing, but coming back to this theme of shifting effort left, a lot of that shift left is around testing when there isn't a GUI available to test with. So in this session, we thought we'd show a little bit of that, the API level testing in UFT1. So what I'm doing here in this slot is, if I go to the next slide, is I'm going to show this demo of our two services that I want to test within UFT1. I'm not going to use the GUI here. I'm going to just test against the services. So this is what we call an API test in UFT1. On the left here, I have a toolbox of the activities that I can use in my test flow. I can import services. So the two services that I'm using here, member accounts and claim processing service, I can import them in, and I can drag them across from the toolbox here, the operations that are on those services, into my main test flow in the center pane here. So list claims, I can bring that in and drop it into my test flow. and create a fully business process test, if you like, out of a sequence of web service calls. The toolbox also has a lot of other operations in it, things I might want to do at the database layer, for example. I might want to maybe kick off a Java method. I might want to include load test transactions, and John will go on to talk more about this, but I might want to time a business process from any 2 points within the sequence here. So I've added some load runner transaction markers, start enter claim and end enter claim, into my test flow here, so that I can get timing metrics back out when I come to replay this. And I can drive it, as you'd expect, from the test data down below the spreadsheet, which will iterate through each of those 5 records that I have down below. And we'll see as I run this test, all the service calls being made to the green and blue services here, but done headlessly. We're not iterating through user interface here, just calling the services directly, parsing the responses, with validation going on to check content as the responses come back. And I have a log here of the iterations and the steps and the results, the response bodies that came back. So I can have validation for, was the test claim approved, for example? If it was approved, what's the approval limit? All of that comes back into here. So just like a GUI test, I can validate steps as the test replays. And that's really the second example, if you like, in this session of shifting the functional test effort left, not just starting at the very end where we have a GUI to use, but allowing developers who may be testing at the API layer to use UFT to test and develop at that level, minimizing the risk earlier in the life cycle. So I'll now hand back to John, who's going to take that asset and show how it can be used in the performance test scenario.
Thanks, Ray. Yeah, so taking API tests that we might have created in the functional testing phase, we're going to look at how we can then use those for performance testing. And we can just take that asset from UFT1 and use it in LoadRunner. So when you create an API test, you can actually create an API test for load, as you can see here, but the testers may have just created standard API tests, in which case there's a button on the toolbar here that enables our test for load testing. Once you click it, it disappears. So it's very easy to tell if a test is enabled. So let's look at the test that Ray created. And you can see that button's not there, so he's obviously enabled it already for load testing, and that option's in the menu as well. So here it is in LoadRunner controller. I've just opened up the test and configured a scenario to run 5 users, ramping up over a short period and running for 2 minutes. I didn't need to do anything else to that test case. I just open it up in LoadRunner, and once we start the scenario, you can see we're hitting that application again, and we're starting to collect the metrics, and you'll see them very shortly in the graphs. So there you can see the running users as we ramp up, and we can see the transaction response times at the top right for our 2 web services. So very easy to take a UFT API script and use that as a basis for a performance test. Maybe we're doing a limited scalability test of individual services, but we could also use this as part of a larger scenario later in the life cycle. So next, continuing that theme of shift left, we're going to look at a new capability within the LoadRunner family called LoadRunner Developer. So for the last year or two, we've been betaing a protocol. It's now called DevWeb, used to be called TrueWeb, and this allows us to develop scripts outside of the traditional LoadRunner tools. So here I'm using Chrome to record an HAR file, and I'm just browsing through our demo site, looking at product categories and product pages. And once we've done our browsing session using the developer options, we can save that as a HAR file. So that's an HTML archive. It's a very long and detailed file. So we need to convert that to something that we can use within our IDE. And for that, we have the offline generator And you can see there's a number of arguments here, one of which is the input file and our new script file, devweb demo. Before we run this though, I'm going to make a template or copy the template for VS Code, which is the IDE I'm using. And copying the template adds all the script files that you need. So we get the main script, the runtime settings, and the scenario, which you would get from the converter. So more importantly, we get these launch files for VS Code, and this will allow us to run the performance test from VS Code without having to do any additional configuration. Okay, so that's it. That converts the script. So let's look at it in VS Code. So here you can see a number of statements with the load SDK. So we've got load.webRequest, and there's our home page. You can see it's captured all the extras. So this is just the conversion from that HAR file. So I've added some transactions here. So we've created AO1 home as a variable, and that's a new load.transaction. And then we've said AO1 home.start. And then if we look at the end of the script, we have the end transaction, AO1 home stop, and then we've got transactions for the category and then the product page that we navigated to. So we've added transactions so we can time our script and time the pages. So now from the task section within VS Code, I've got a number of options. We're just going to choose single vUser. So that's running the script, it's capturing the response times, and we can see those response times in the table within the output log. So that's a single user, but we can also run a scenario, and we can run up to 50 users with Load Runner Developer from an IDE. So here I've configured it for 5 users, 30-second ramp up, and a 60-second duration. So now again from the terminal task runner, I can choose to run a load test. So this is now running with 5 users. And also within Load Runner Developer, we have integration with some open source tools, Influx and Grafana. So we're outputting the data to Influx, and there's a simple configuration file within Load Runner Developer that where you set that up. And then we've downloaded the Grafana dashboard from Load Runner Developer, and you can see here we've got the typical performance metrics, running users, transaction response times, throughput, hits, and bytes. So for a developer, they can create performance tests that can then be used in the Load Runner family of tools without having to use any of our specific script development tools. They can stay within their IDE, they can run the test, and using other open source tools, they can monitor the results. And it's very likely they're using some of these tools already. So that's Load Runner Developer and the DevWeb protocol. You can download LR Developer from our marketplace website, and it's free of charge for up to 50 users, and then you can take those scripts and use them with the standard web protocol license within the other Load Runner tools. So now I'm going to hand back to Ray, who's going to take us through testing with virtual services.
Thanks again, John. So yeah, the issue with shifting left often is availability. It's if I want to test, there are bits of the system that aren't available to me. Maybe they're in production, maybe they haven't been developed yet, maybe they cost money to consume. So in this section we're going to concentrate on how we can fill those gaps so that people can test end-to-end early and often. So service virtualization is our product here, and what you have is, say in this scenario that I'm going to show, a site, Advantage Online Shopping website. We've got a number of web services there, and we have a web client. In the middle there, we're going to stick in service virtualization and begin to capture the traffic from the web client and switch off and learn this catalog service so that the real service isn't being hit by the traffic that we're generating. So in other words, we're testing end-to-end using the virtual catalog service, and then we're going to drive a test from Load Runner Developer. So plugging the gaps in the full end-to-end system by simulating it. So switching into the demo, what you're seeing here now is service virtualization simulating that catalog service. We have the data model, which is what type of data will return, good or bad, positive, negative, and also the performance model. So business as usual, performance, slow performance, ultra fast performance. One of the nice things about virtual services is you get to play with these boundary conditions. You can control the service's behavior. So this is a 5-second response time, we're saying, for that virtual service when it's running slowly. At the moment, we have it running as business as usual, and I can see the endpoint deployed here, throwing back good data and performing as business as usual. And so when I go to consume that virtual service, you can see it here returning quite quickly with a catalog of items here for me in the browser. I have here a test script then in LoadRunner Developer that includes a call to that catalog service. It's around this transaction here, get categories number 3. So I've just wrapped that around the virtual service that I'm going to call, and then we'll run that as a performance test, and you'll see that one transaction, and it will stay around the 5-second marker if I switch to the slow catalog virtual service. So one of the things in here is I can control the behavior of the virtual service from the IDE. So slow catalog virtual service there, switch from the business as usual performance to the slow performance. What's it going to be like for the rest of my test under those conditions? So I've just asked SV to switch the performance model dynamically here from business as usual to slow. We've switched back into service virtualization. You can see it's implemented that there now. So I'm now consuming the slow performing catalog service, and I can kick off my performance test to test everything about that Advantage Online shopping site, including that call to the slow catalog service. So switching back into the dashboard again, Grafana here that John showed earlier. You can see the transactions beginning to build up. Some of the virtual users here hitting the home transaction, getting account details, and then there's our third transaction, get categories. And you'll see under the transaction response time graph that stays around the 5-second mark, because that's what we've asked the virtual service to do, return that within 5 seconds. That might be very, very slow for what the rest of the system is expecting here. So I'm validating what's the impact of this very slow performance on the rest of my business process in the Advantage Online shopping site. So plugging the gaps in availability with virtual services using service virtualization, again, facilitating that shifting the effort left in the life cycle. So with that, I'll hand back to Sean, who's going to take it back up a level and talk about enterprise application delivery. Sean.
Thank you very much, Ray. So taking it up a level to the enterprise, I was speaking with some colleagues from the Scaled Agile framework, and one of the things that they called out was that a lot of organizations really struggle or miss that whole concept of the KPIs at that portfolio level. So let's take a look. We'll drill down in now and look at that portfolio level solution. So within an organization, we need to have a strategy of what direction we're going to go. What is the direction and that we're going to sail our ship towards? What do we need to actually do? So describing and articulating our global strategic themes for the whole organization is something we need to make visible. We also have our hierarchy of where in the organization do we fit. So as I drill down into a particular node in that hierarchy, we see that we have different strategic themes and we have different goals for that particular area that we're looking at. We drill down into the details and we can see how that strategic theme gets broken down into different targets and metrics. So what revenue do we expect and what demands do we have within the organization? And what forecast do we have to actually be able to meet those? And then we can articulate those different KPIs at a very granular level as those business goals to be able to make sure we're on track to deliver those, making sure that the data that sits underneath, and Ahmed is going to talk about being able to pull in the the low-level details to be able to understand, are we actually on track? When are we going to deliver? When should we get the actual business value from those things? So are we trending in the right direction? Do we need to shift and pivot and be able to look at the details of what is driving that return on investment to make sure that we're actually getting things done in a timely way, so that over time we can see when are we meant to be finishing those particular initiatives and be able to understand that. If we shift our view a little bit now and take a look at our list of those initiatives that we're going through, are we, what is the water cut line? So we see our gray line there to be able to understand, do we have enough capacity? If we were to flex and change what we want to do, what would we be able to deliver within the resource and budget constraints and the strategy? At the moment, we're looking good. Everything is going green, and we're able to meet the demands as far as the budget and then as far as the resource capability. But are we on track with what the strategy is? Making sure that we've stayed focused on what that strategic initiative is matching towards what we want to deliver inside of there. So making sure that we stay focused on what those strategic themes are, and then able to deliver on the expected results and the expected outcome from there. So it's giving us that visibility of what are our metrics, our KPIs that we want to track and deliver against, and making sure that we stay focused on delivering against those KPIs. So it's able to define what they are at a granular level for our individual portfolio objects, and then be able to shift and pivot to be able to say, when are we going to deliver those? I want that sooner. If I make these decisions of being able to pull things forward, pull things out, make those adjustments, we can give that visibility as to what impact those decisions will have against our whole portfolio then. So we're able to then manage our constraints and be able to make those changes as we're going forward. So SAFE tells us that we need to manage those KPIs, and we might then, by being able to manage those at a very high business level, we might be able to then measure them and make the adjustments at that business level. If we're not measuring it, there's no way that we can shift and pivot on the direction that we want to move towards. It's important to be able to understand where we're going and what we've accomplished. So I'm going to hand over to Ahmed, and he's going to talk about how the testing team would be able to manage that test execution. Ahmed?
Thank you, Sean. Yes, I'm going to now talk about WebRunner, which delivers a new web interface for our ALM customers to perform manual tests and submit defects. Manual testers no longer have to switch back and forth between the test environments and the ALM instances. So we'll have a quick look at a short preview of ALM WebRunner. Here you can see I'm actually using Chrome, not Internet Explorer, which is the de facto standard historically. And here I can actually specify and select the container for my tests. I'm selecting a test suite, and now I'm going to actually run a single test. So here you can see on the left we have a list of our test steps. I can look at the detail view and grid view preference, and now I can actually pass and fail a step as required. We can move through validating the expected results, and we can obviously then pass or fail that. At any time, I can obviously fail a step and also raise a defect. So here you can see, you can actually now raise a defect and log out. The key thing here is that all the test results, along with any attachments, can be submitted automatically and synchronized to the ALM repository. So ALM WebRunner is a great lightweight client to run manual tests in any browser. Again, just finishing off there, it's obviously running some of those manual tasks that we want to do. I'll now hand over to Sean, who will talk about ways of working in teams.
Sure, thank you very much, Ahmed. So life is changing, and agility gives us that framework to be able to handle that change. So as we're all aware, that change has been forced into a lot of organizations. For example, our team in China, which is doing a lot of work around UFT mobile, had to be locked down before a lot of our other teams were. So they had to shift and pivot in the way that they were planning their work and being able to coordinate with other teams. As an organization, Micro Focus then shifted its collaborative platform to Microsoft Teams, and it very quickly went almost within a matter of a week or weeks, I should say. We shifted to Microsoft Teams and quickly adopted that, and that ability to be agile meant that we were able to then start and push out a lot of changes and accelerate that change. So we went from 0 messaging to 12 million messages going back and forth across MS Teams. So we're able to very quickly and collaboratively work together. So teams need to be able to respond to this change, and we need to be respectful that across the ways of working, we're going to have to work with teams in different geographies and different locations. So we might have in the past flown people to a particular location, do that planning all in one room, and that compresses that time that we need to do that planning. Speaking with colleagues again at the SAFE organization, Scaled Agile Framework, they would do a planning event across 2 days. Well, what they found is that they're having to span that planning across 2, 3, even 4 days as they're planning things out, because they need to be respectful of the humanity of the people now working from home, or the humanity of people across different time zones. So they're building into that schedule overlaps that are going to take place where it makes sense to do synchronizations, or they can break things out into separate time zones where teams can sit individually together in the same time zone. So it's being mindful of the changes that need to happen, and at the same time using systems and tools like Octane to be able to drive the conversation. So keeping the conversation in the context of the work that is ongoing. So rather than sending a lot of email back and forth and we lose that connection to the actual work that needs to happen, we focus in on and say, these are the big pieces of work. Have the conversation around the work, and then the conversation doesn't get lost over time. We don't lose that email connection because we've got it tied directly to the individual teams. So speaking of teams, I've had quite a few conversations with teams that need to start to thinking of automating, and that context switching can be quite painful to them. So Davey's now going to talk about our RPA solution and how that can help with that automation of being able to pick up the work. Davey?
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Good morning. My name's David Grant, also part of the UK pre-sales team based in Scotland. Yeah, I'm going to talk about robotic process automation. First, for those not familiar with robotic process automation, RPA, let me summarize its use for businesses. So no matter if you're working in the public sector or private sector, people are spending too much time on mundane, error-prone tasks across the organization. People are logging in, logging out of multiple legacy and web apps. You're pasting data between applications. How much time is spent filling out forms, opening emails and attachments? Users move files and folders to manipulate, prepare, merge data from multiple sources. This probably sounds familiar. With our latest solution, RPA, that gives you the power to build secure automated processes from legacy mainframes to the latest applications. RPA mimics these human actions described to perform their everyday tasks to save time and money on the processes. RPA brings together two proven products into a single product. It combines both UFT recording and operations orchestration technologies. Existing customers actually found a way to use operations orchestration UFT with their RPA scenarios, and they came to us, Micro Focus, asking for a single RPA product. Clients also wanted a solution that wasn't only about web, but other technologies such as SAP and legacy systems, and this is what we provide with RPA. So how does it work here? We can see it consists of three logical components. The designer provides an easy-to-use interface for building and maintaining the automated processes, including a recorder to record the user screen actions. Designer provides a visual low-code or no-code interface, making it possible for you to do all the work in one screen. It also has debug capability to rerun with new data or with parameters. The orchestrator itself, this is the brains of RPA, and this executes RPA workflows, manages and controls the robots. We can track all these actions, and it also provides a metrics dashboard with additional insights such as the RPA return on investment. How well is it performing for you? The third component, which is the robots, that executes the robotic tasks, combining UI and API automation steps, interacting with the application and data. So let's take a quick look at its features in the following demo. So in this short demo, we're taking an RPA flow, which creates a new user in the SAP application. I'm enhancing the recorded flow seen here to show the designer's capability to combine flows. I'm creating an additional flow to pull the user data from an Excel document. The data from the Excel document will act as inputs for a recorded SAP process with multiple users to be created in SAP. I can search under the dependencies library for the Excel process I want to use, drag and drop it to the designer UI, and it then prompts me for the inputs such as the Excel file name, sheet rows. Under the flow properties, I can add these inputs as variables defining their default values, such as where the file is located, the Excel path, what is the sheet name, the file header names for each of the user details, usernames, password, email, first name and last name, all for SAP. We can add default values if required. I can also add outputs as I'm going to use this data in the recorded flow. With those variables defined, I can select from a drop-down menu and each input that's required in this flow. File name, worksheet, does the document have headers, which row, for example, does the data start? I would then return to the project and drag the SAP RP recorded flow, drag a success endpoint, and then you wire the flows simply together. As the Excel document will have multiple users to be added to SAP, I set the add users flow as a loop, and I'm prompted again for inputs. I simply tell it here to loop on each row of the Excel document, which is the data. Once I'm happy with the data, I can run this in debug mode before deploying any content. The flow itself executes and we can see the status of each step, if it's successful or if it fails. If it fails, I can drill down on the error. On completion, and we're happy with the results, I can deploy it to RP Central, where the orchestrator RP Central can run and schedule the flows. So before passing on to Ahmed, I want to have a quick summary of some of the Micro Focus RPA features in the next slide. The Design Studio, this is an intuitive interface to record UI actions and design RPA workflows in one screen. You can use UFT scripts, you can take the visual route as seen in the demo, or you can even let developers, automation engineers work with code. It has resilient robots that adapt to changes in the application UI. Central orchestration combines UI and API automation steps and manages and controls the robots centrally. We have a user-friendly self-service portal to run RP workflows without exposing any data to the end user. The robots are scalable with worker queue-based architecture to scale it both up and down as the workloads change. And from a security perspective, sensitive data, login and password information are stored in a security vault instead of locally. Robots have a unique IDs and role-based credentials. They can run in lock screen, use encrypted password, and automate the process without exposing sensitive data. So these are only some of the key features we wanted to introduce in the overview, and I hope this was of interest. I'll now hand over to Ahmed, who will show how we connect between not only our own tools, but also third-party tools and systems.
Thank you, David. As you've heard, we have many of our customers that have a large number of tools and systems across the organization, and they have challenges in gaining traceability across them. We have a product called MF Connect, which is a single integration hub that has a smart synchronization capabilities. It can help break down the disconnects and silos across the software development lifecycle. This helps transform the chaos into a more managed business process, enabling traceability into software delivery across teams, projects, and locations. So we have a quick preview here. We can see we're logged in through a browser we will actually need to specify a data source. So first you need to specify the target and master application that you want to synchronize to. You can see we have different support for different connectors. Obviously, things like Jira, Excel that you may want to synchronize to, and obviously we can add and configure different connections accordingly. If we look at the properties for our Octane connector, we can see we need to specify the username and password and any other required settings which are highlighted in red here that may be required. Again, things like properties, types, and relationships, we can map between entities and we can synchronize across those relationships. So again, one data source can be created to another, and we can connect the target and master for a synchronization. The key thing here is, as I said, we have the capability to synchronize, specify between different tools. We connect our own tools, but also with third-party tools. We haven't got time to show you a full synchronization here, but the key thing here is that it allows us to obviously provide better mitigating risk, increase quality, and speed up the software delivery process by joining and connecting the dots across the tool estate in your ecosystems. So again, a very short sort of brief overview, but I'll now hand over back to Rob, who will look at test data and maintaining consistency.
Thanks, Ahmed. So one of the things which has come out consistently in the World Quality Report is how people manage data. And this is, as I said, we've done this with a couple of partners over the last 11 years or so. And this is from the current World Quality Report. It's really making the point that data has become fundamental, in everybody's lives. Whether it's going through to a banking application, whether it's you're applying for something or whatever you may well be doing, it's all based on data. So it's really about how you're testing, and using that data. One of the things that also has come out in the World Quality Report, so this is really asking people how many people are redoing new data every single test that they want to do, or for every single environment throughout the years. So this is effectively saying we use Excel to prepare test data every single pass that we do. So you can see back in 2004 it's about 59. It hasn't really changed much, which was one of the things that come out. Organizations understand that the data is important, but many organizations aren't doing much about it. So what we've done is we've brought together a couple of tools that we had within our Vertica portfolio to release Data Privacy Manager. And the point of this is then to be able to attach to different data sources, to be able to pull out the data and be able to manage it on a very secure way. So the first part of it is data discovery. So this will go off and find whatever data you've got connected to particular different sources, whether they're database, whether they're LDAP systems or whatever else they may well be, find out the data and then classify it into names, addresses, social security numbers, postcodes, etc. And you can also enforce different throughout the cycle from a central point of view across those things. But once you've got that data, you can then obviously encrypt it, anonymize it. A lot of systems when they're pulling out data, when they're obfuscating it, they'll just hash out different parts here. What we can do is, if you've got a postcode, for instance, it will be in the same format of the postcode. The postcode will be different, but it will be letter, number, etc. And will look like a postcode, making it easy to test against. And also, being able to anonymize private information. We can then apply different security to it to govern different regulations. Obviously, here in Europe, GDPR, or they've got various different laws coming out in California, etc. at the moment. But be able to manage those different processes, but being able to make it easy to get data. One of the things, obviously, with DevOps, as I said right at the beginning, is it's about lots of little things. Test data management has been one of those very big things for many organizations, depending on who they are, throughout the years, and being able to try and make sense of it. So so that's test data management, which we've now got. And just coming to the end of this, one of the other things which I know Ray's going to talk about is how we're introducing artificial intelligence to a range of different tools, but particularly within functional test automation. So Ray.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, the test data management has been a big gap for us over the years for a lot of our customers, and it's great that we have these products in the big Micro Focus portfolio available now that we can have, you know, detailed drill down sessions on with any of you if you'd like to have it after this session. Artificial intelligence is another such area, and we're going to use this last session. It's going to be over 7 or 8 minutes, but just to go through what we're doing in AI around functional testing, and this touches upon the robotic process automation that Davey talked about, as well as the test development for developers and for functional testers. So I've spoken earlier about shifting left, and we talked about the UFT developer plugin for Selenium and for other environments, and the UFT API type tests for testing headlessly, so you're not just limited to testing on a GUI. But here, what if very early on you've just got a prototype? You know, if you try and use a tool like UFT against that, all you see is this pink blob around all of these objects. It doesn't understand any of them. This is where artificial intelligence can come in, because we can, instead of recognizing objects, we can look at something like a JPEG. So you can see here, I've got in my Octane, my work, I've got mock-ups for SAP. In this case, I'm using SAP as an example, application, a mobile web application, different screens that are early mock-ups for what the interface might look like. And I can begin to automate them? Well, traditionally, no, you can't. You can take the UFT SPY, you can see it's just seeing that big, horrible pink blob, doesn't see any of the objects in it. And here's what we've introduced as a feature flag option in UFT 15 is the AI identification of those. So you can see immediately there, it's picking up on objects in there, the buttons, the edit fields, and I can also search for text. So what a human would look for. So here I'm looking for the text box user, and I can, you know, enhance the script to say what the username should be. I want to bring the password from that mockup across and put in what the password should be. And then I'll move on to the next screen. Maybe I'll click on the login button. That's right. Let's look for the text as a difference. So you can see the green areas there picked up by the AI. So find text block called login. So looking for some text in the screen. No object repository here. It's not aware of what controls are or anything. It's just looking at it and scanning the JPEG for content. Here I'm looking for that profile icon. So I want to just log in, click on that profile icon, and carry on from there. So let's again use the AI inspector here and look for text. It's found a lot of text. And there's the profile icon. So I can drag that too across into my test. And you'll notice as well, it assumes I want to click on it. So it's completing a lot of this work for you, as well as giving a very simple script, also a script that will reliably replay across different devices and browser types, because it's very, very simple, not relying on the underlying technology at all. I can code it from here, put in, find text for sign out, for example, might be the next step. I don't have to do it by inspecting the JPEGs of the mockups. Let's then take the last step, which is this one. I want to log out, sign out, yes. And again, I can inspect that and look at the text or the visual element, the button. Let's just take the text again, drag it across and click again. It's assuming I want to click on OK. So it's a very simple script based on the prototype, knows nothing about the objects underneath. There's no object repository here. And it's very simple to understand what it's doing. And we're also enhancing that to make it more English. We have AI codeless, which is natural language processing, which I'm not going to show here, but an enhancement on that. So we've now got to the point in time where the real app is available. So you can see this is the production environment now. We've zipped forward a few months perhaps. You can see it looks a bit different. It's got that log on there. Because I'm searching for a specific text here, I'll just change that to log on. And let's take that now and try and replay the test that I recorded against the prototype and replay that using the test script that AI has generated for me. So here are the emulators. You can see the list that I spoke about earlier, a pretty big list of supported emulators that we add to all the time. Let's take the Galaxy S10e one here, apply that, and we'll run it. So from here now, it's going to do what UFT normally does, just invoke the application, and you'll see it rendering it, but for the S10e. So it's entering the username, the password. It's going to look for log on, finds it, clicks on it, logging in. See that little black circle there is AI scanning that screen, looking for the profile icon, which is now on the left-hand side, not the right-hand side as it was in the prototype. Clicking on it, and then looking for sign out and signing out. So we've gone there from a prototype through to production, very simple script, and it replays and works fine. I'm showing SAP Fiori here. The concept remains the same for different, anything you can render in a web browser or any mobile app. Because we're not tied to specific technology here, because we're recognizing visual elements and looking for text, we're taking away the complexity of different applications in their development environments and so on. So the report there, very standard in UFT, very visual report. I can inspect it, but let's extend this an extra step, cross-platform. Let's do this across multiple devices. So using the inbuilt emulators, let's generate a list of devices that I want to test this against. So I'm now going to use the data sheet in UFT here, paste values in. Okay, it's not there. Let me just get some devices that I prepared earlier, paste them in to the spreadsheet. So we'll have a list of devices that it will iterate through. So I'm now taking from that prototype and iterating through on the production version of the application across multiple device emulators here in UFT1. And as I go to run this, what you'll see to begin with is the first one, which is the Chrome browser itself, and a much bigger landscape here. So I'm now testing for that. And again, it finds the edits, clicking on the log on button, and then a very big screen to scan through, looking for that profile icon. Again, different to the prototype over in the top left now, finds it, clicks on it. Behind this, there's a model of 8,000 plus images, objects, controls that AI is aware of. We have a feedback loop in AI that lets you add to that model so that it's continually learning. Iteration number 2 here. Again, looks like a tablet that I'm emulating now. And logging in, password, clicking the log on button. So bear in mind, in the space of 5 minutes, I've gone from a prototype with screenshots of a prototype through to automating against the production environment, production app version across different types of devices. So a resilient, simple test, sign out, and there we are signing out from there. And a third iteration, one of the chunky plus-sized phones this time. Again, checking that it's responsive design in this case, and renders properly on that interface. And the AI isn't fooled by the location of the objects or even things like a sign-in button being the same as a log-on button, for example. AI copes with that. It's got associations. It knows what to look for. So that's the basic idea here. Is with AI, we're really trying to make it easy to have robust, simple test scripts that can be used early in the life cycle, shifting the effort left, to create a test script that's going to replay reliably across multiple platforms. And that same technology becomes available in robotic process automation as well, because we're reusing the UFT in there as a means of automating those individual steps. So it is feature flagged in UFT 15. You switch it on, it's off by default. We have an extra tool called AI Codeless, which is a completely natural language script that is built up for the automation. That's there as well. You can use that. And there's a feedback loop direct into the R&D teams to add to the awareness that AI has of all the different types of objects and images that it might see in any of your web and mobile applications. So with that, I'll hand back now to Rob to summarize.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ray. That looks good stuff. So really what we wanted to do today is just give you a whistle-stop tour of 20 things. Like I say, 20 things is, is just a tiny part of what we've done and what we've released. So hopefully that's been interesting and informative to everybody. I can see we've got some questions which have come in throughout the session. I can see some of them are relating to all the various different pieces that we've shown and where you can get hold of these. So I just wanted to bring your attention to our Micro Focus Marketplace. So if you search for Micro Focus Marketplace and you go to the app delivery piece, which is obviously where we sit, you can go in there and you can browse all sorts of different plugins there. So John talked about LoadRunner Developer and DevWeb, etc. Which you can see there some of the UFT mobile things, client launcher, etc., which Ahmed was talking about, and many hundreds of more different things. So they're all available to go into and download. But if we just want to take, I think we've got about 10 minutes or so, we can take some of the questions that we've got coming in here. So let me see. So I think probably this first one's for you, Ray. So question is, you said that UFT1 supports mobile emulators. My connection dropped, so I missed that part before, but can you also test real devices directly connected to UFT without using UFT mobile? Do you want to jump in there, Ray?
Yes, so you can tether a local device to UFT1 and automate against that locally without using UFT mobile. I think there was a question as well about support for emulators and how quickly they become available. We have a repository in GitHub and an XML file that is updated regularly with the latest. I think the latest iOS version that the product supports is 14.01 beta, so we follow very quickly on Apple and Google as they release new versions of the operating systems.
Yeah, and I think it's important to add to that too. We're also part of the Apple and Google beta systems, so we obviously get access to these things before as part of their different developer communities. So here, probably this one's for you, John. So LoadRunner Developer DevWeb looks pretty cool. Is it free for all LoadRunner customers and across all LoadRunner versions? So Pro, Enterprise, Cloud, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't actually need to have LoadRunner to use LoadRunner Developer. So you can download it, as you say, from the marketplace, and it has everything you need to run up to 50 users free of charge with their IDE or outside of the LoadRunner tools. But those scripts can then be used within the LoadRunner tools as well.
Okay, wonderful. Probably one for you, Ahmed. The ADM client launcher looks pretty interesting. What versions of ALM are we supporting with that?
It was actually first introduced with ALM 12.5. Obviously, customers can download the latest release from the marketplace to support maybe version 15. and the latest release is 2.1 of the ALM client launcher.
Okay, wonderful. Probably another one here for you, John. Can we view application under test system monitors in LoadRunner Cloud?
Yes, you can. We support integrations with SiteScope, of course, as well as things like New Relic, Dynatrace, App Dynamics, and some Azure monitors. So you can collect those monitoring stats into LoadRunner Cloud, and all of the analytics we looked at today will also work against those monitoring metrics.
Okay, wonderful. And another one, whilst you're there, can I use LoadRunner Developer with Eclipse?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So Eclipse, Visual Studio, VS Code, IntelliJ, and some others, Atom, I think. So it supports most of the major IDEs. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Just the other thing to point out, you can see my email address there on the screen. So if you didn't get a chance, or we somehow miss one of your questions, then please feel free to email me directly, and I can pass it on to any relevant person in the team, etc. But to plug on here with some more questions, RPA, probably one for you, Davey. Can you use regular UFT scripts with RPA?
Yes, you can. We didn't have time to show that, but if you're in UFT in the latest version, you have the option to file save as an RPA script, and you can use that within the RPA. But it also, one of the things it also has, in addition to UFT, it's got an RPA recorder, which is similar in style, and you can record your scripts within. So you've got a couple of options there for creating scripts.
Okay, wonderful. One for you, Ray, about AI. What versions you were saying that it works with UFT1? Does it need specific versions, and how does all that plug in?
Yeah, it's UFT 1.15.01 is the current release. It's always good to be on the latest one for if you want to try out the AI, because it is being it's in tech preview. It's being enhanced all the time, so it's good to be current with that. There's a feedback loop where people can give feedback if necessary, or add to it. In terms of how you use it, it's feature flagged, so it's off by default in UFT1. You go into the tools options and enable it, and that gives you that SPY that I showed in the demo. There's also a separate installation altogether called AI Codeless that we didn't have time to go into today. That's the natural language processing script. So instead of using UFT1 to create your test script, you have something that looks very much like English, something you type up in Notepad, which is your test script environment. And that's AI Codeless. That's included on the UFT 1.15 distribution. It's a separate installation, so you can use it there, and we're very keen to get feedback.
Okay, wonderful. I should also say that AI is one of those things that is a whole strategy for us. I mean, obviously, as Ray's shown it, it's been implemented in UFT1, and AI has become one of those buzzwords in the IT industry. The IT industry loves its buzzwords, but it really is a game changer when it comes to automated testing. We were saying there at the beginning how automated testing, looking at the World Quality Report, how it's not really lived up to the promise that we had 10 years ago, because people want to run faster and things break, etc. To be able to do that right from the outset, right the way through your application delivery is a big deal. But on top of the automated testing too, it's something that Sean started talking about with Octane, and looking at some of the analytic modules. None of that stuff that he showed back then is based on our AI just yet, but within a few relatively short releases, it will be trying to make sense of all that data. So there's a UFT question which I think we've got coming in, which was I think you answered that, didn't you, Ray, about the UFT mobile and iOS device time. So effectively, what the question is when Apple do a change, when they bring out a new iOS version, how quickly do we able to support that, and as we say, we're part of the developer communities within those. So most times it's just it's pretty much there as they release those different versions of iOS and for Google with their respective operating systems. So with that, I can see we're just coming to the end of time. First of all, I want to say thank you to my colleagues for helping out with this. Much appreciate, but particularly thank you to everybody who's joined. I hope it was useful, and it's been good fun putting it together. So thank you very much for your time, and I'd like to say enjoy the rest of your days.